Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Chief Chip Jewell, Director of the Division of Volunteer Fire Rescue Services, and I welcome you to today's September 11th tribute. Would you please rise for the presentation of the colors and remain standing until after the invocation? This time we'll have the national anthem sung by Angela Spencer of the Frederick County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. On the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please join me in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Shoulders on. Detail. Post. Color. Cover. Right. Face. Hold. Mark. At this time, we'll have the invocation by Reverend Dr. Eliezer Valentin-Castanon, Trinity United Methodist Church.
Would you bow your heads and pray with me? O God, our hope and refuge in our distress, we come quickly to you. Shock and horror of that tragic day have subsided, replaced now with an emptiness, a longing for an innocence lost. We come remembering those who lost their lives in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. We are mindful of the sacrifice of public servants who demonstrated their greatest love of all by laying down their lives for friends. We commit their souls to your eternal care and celebrate their gifts to a fallen humanity. We come remembering, and we come in hope, not in ourselves, but in you. As foundations we once thought secure have been shaken, we are reminded of the illusion of security. In commemorating this tragedy, we come to you humbled by the knowledge that in our time of need, you are always with us. You have always been present when we have needed you the most. Today, as we struggle with life challenges, as we remember the tragic events of September 11, 2001, help us to remember that we are one people, and one people, as one people, we will come through any challenges that come our way, always remembering your love and mercy toward us. Although we are more than Christians in Frederick, every person of faith prays to you today. Yet I pray in the name of Jesus that you accompany us in our commemoration, that you lead us as we remember that you, O God, you alone are God, and that you are always present in our work. You are always present in the midst of our challenges and in the midst of our difficulties. We thank you, O God, for the opportunity to be here, to commemorate, to remember those who died. And above all things, Lord, to remember that we have indeed inherited a legacy to live, to do things right in your name. Be with us, O God, as we continue to remember. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. And would like to express our appreciation to the combined honor guard of the Frederick County Fire Rescue and Frederick County Sheriff's Office, to Angela Spencer, and also to Pastor Eliezer for agreeing to participate in today's tribute. At this time, I would like to introduce a few guests. Burgess of Walkersville, Chad Weddle. Chad. Mayor of Frederick, Randy McClement. Mayor, thank you. Alderman Kelly Russell. Mike Berninsky, Board of Education. Thank you, sir. Garrison Commander Colonel Scott Halter. And are there any other elected officials here today that we may have missed? Thank you. On behalf of County Executive Jan Gardner, Frederick County Council, and really the citizens of Frederick County, we welcome you today to this tribute and commemoration of September 11th, 2001. At this time, I would like to welcome to the podium Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner for her comments.
Thank you, Chip. I appreciate very much, and if you would join me in appreciation to Chip Jewell, who is the chief of our Division of Volunteer Fire and Rescue Services. He has faithfully served as the MC of this event for 16 years, and he really puts his heart and soul into this and to everything else that he does. 16 years ago today, our nation changed forever. On that bright, beautiful Tuesday morning, a day much like today, a beautiful fall day, our nation was deeply wounded. We cried, we bled, and thousands of our fellow Americans died. Today, we remember those who gave their lives, especially those who put themselves into harm's way to save the lives of other people at the Pentagon, at the World Trade Center, and the passengers of Flight 93, who, when they learned what was happening, rose to the challenge and ultimately sacrificed themselves to thwart the terrorists and to prevent another tragedy. On that Tuesday morning, our nation pulled together. We stood together as Americans, ready to help each other, ready to support each other, ready to stand united, and ready to face our future together. It is in that spirit of unity that we gather here today. We will never forget where we were that morning 16 years ago. The memories of that day are etched into our minds and into our very souls. I was here in Winchester Hall in a public meeting of the Board of County Commissioners when the first report started to come in, and we were passing notes down among us. We thought when the first plane struck the World Trade Towers that it was a small plane and that it was an accident. But as the morning events unfolded, we realized that America was under attack. And like millions of people around the county, we adjourned our meeting and we went and we stood around our television sets and we watched in shock and disbelief. We watched really in total shock and disbelief as the skyscrapers tumbled and as the Pentagon walls were breached. And then we heard the words, "Let's roll," echoing in a plane's cabin over a field in Pennsylvania. Our lives as Americans would never be the same. We will never forget how the nation's men and women responded on that fateful day. Firefighters and law enforcement officials ran into buildings as the walls collapsed around them. Members of the military went into action to tighten our defenses. Fighter jets actually circled over Frederick County, even as commercial airlines were grounded, raising some alarm throughout the citizens of the county that Camp David and maybe Fort Detrick was the next target. I know I went to my daughter's elementary school that day to pick her up from school because, like many parents, we wanted to go gather our children. And the parents were frantic in the foyer of that school. I actually stood on a chair and said, "Camp David is not under attack," because I knew a little bit more than what the average parent, mostly the moms, knew. The Woodsboro Volunteer Fire Company drove a 1955 engine to Arlington, Virginia, because it was the only vehicle in the region that would fit in the Pentagon's narrow hallways. We will never forget the members of the Frederick community who lost their sons that day. Frederick resident Bob Carlos' 34-year-old son Michael was a New York City firefighter. He was in the South Tower of the World Trade Center with the crew of Engine 230 when the tower collapsed. 26-year-old Alan Litton Jr., who was an investment banker, he was already at work that morning on the 104th floor of the South Tower. He actually took a moment to call his mother to say he was okay after the first plane struck. He was the son of Sharon and Pat Litton. Alan would drive home many weekends so that he could visit his family, because they were a close family, and to teach Sunday school at the Church of the Brethren. Not long after the attacks in New York that morning, tragedy did strike closer to home as a commercial plane flew into the Pentagon. 2 residents of Mount Airy lost their lives inside the Department of Defense headquarters. William Ruth and Lieutenant Commander Ronald Vaughn, who spent their professional careers protecting our country. They died that day simply because they reported to work. We will never forget them. During the past 16 years, members of our armed forces have risked their lives in foreign lands to prevent another attack on American soil. We will never forget the soldiers, the airmen, and the Marines who've made the ultimate sacrifice on our behalf. There have been so many lives touched by the events of that day. First responders and volunteers who search through the rubble and debris continue to battle both physical and mental effects of their experience. We know many firefighters and others have died as a result of cancer from being on that search and rescue effort. We gather each September to remember these people and to remember their families and to remember how our nation came together and grew even stronger as a result of that day. Today, we also remember our local public safety heroes, our law enforcement, our military personnel, our firefighters, our emergency management officials, and many others who put their lives on the line every day for us right here in our own community. They're represented in this audience here today, and I want to thank you for your service, and I know all the citizens of our county want to thank you as well. So when you see a military personnel, a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, a firefighter, or a healthcare worker, and healthcare workers have become first responders in this effort as well, take a moment and thank that individual. They deserve our support and our gratitude, and we need to show our appreciation to them every day and never take them for granted. In Frederick County, we are especially blessed, and we have an exceptionally strong and united public safety personnel in law enforcement, fire and rescue, emergency management, health and medical organizations, and civilian aid groups. We're honored to have a multi-agency organization that watches over our citizens every day from every angle. Formed in 2005, the Emergency Management Policy Advisory Committee provides oversight and emphasizes communication and cooperation with regard to emergency preparedness and response. These leaders provide recommendations to the county because we recognize our unique challenges and our unique location being so close to Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. The officials in this group include law enforcement, public health, schools, seniors, transportation, fire and rescue, our municipalities, our communications team, our local hospitals, and our military base, and many others. We work together on a daily basis, so should the need arise, we can achieve the best results. Just like those who responded on September 11th and made the ultimate sacrifice for those in danger. We are now more prepared as a country than ever before. But the work must continue so that we remain in a state of readiness. We need every community and every person to be prepared and ready for large and small emergencies that may occur. We will never forget that day in September of 2001, but all of us will continue to define our freedom and what is good in the world. So today, I'm pleased to say that we are going to premiere a special video presentation titled Stories of September 11th. You will hear very powerful and personal stories of individuals and family members in our community who were personally involved in the events of September 11th. And I am grateful for their willingness to share their stories. So let's pause a minute and view the video.
September 11th started out that day like any other day. I worked at the Frederick County Emergency Communications Center. I was on duty, and we usually have the morning news on, and we were watching it, and all of a sudden, boom, that first plane hit, and it's like, uh-oh. And then the second one hit, and everybody knew then that life was about to change. Things got real busy, and I came home. I received a telephone call from the communications center, and they said, we've got a call from the command post at the Pentagon, and they wanted to know if you would take your ladder truck down to the Pentagon. And I said, well, if they need us and our country needs us, we'll be on the way. What they needed us for was to fit inside the Pentagon, because the entrance ceilings were only 10 feet tall, and none of the modern equipment would fit in there. And ironically, our doors here are 10 feet. So we've never bought anything over 10 feet, so I knew that we would fit. When we got down there, it was dark. And as we approached I'm expecting to see a lot of stuff. They had the part where the plane went in was all lit up with lights, and you could see that. We got an escort to bring us in. I forget where exactly they picked us up, but they escorted us in. They had an inside the Pentagon command post, and the commander walked up, and I'll never forget this the rest of my life. Here we were, a bunch of, this older truck, country boys, long way from home, from the fire department, and he walked up to this tall, lanky captain walked up to me and said, "Chief, how can I help you help us?" I will take that phrase to my grave, because it was the greatest introduction that I've ever heard. And I walked over to command post, and what had happened, where the plane hit, naturally there was fire. And they had been attacking it all day, but as darkness set in, there was pockets of jet fuel all over the place. And every now and then you hear explosions. And they decided it was too unsafe to try to put the fire out tonight, to stop it and not let it go any further into the Pentagon, and then we'll battle it in the morning. We were the last line of defense. We were at the section where the fire had burned up to, and our job was to keep that drowned with water. Command post had asked us, can you get any deeper into the Pentagon? And I said, I'll find out. And actually there was a guy on a golf cart who was a maintenance guy, and I said, if anybody knows this place, he does. I said, will you give me a ride down to where the most damage was? They want us to go down in there. So he said, yes, sir. And he took me down in there, and it was too unsafe to go down inside it. I looked down the one hallway, and I said, what is that? It just looked like, I didn't know what it was. It was weird. And I walked up to it, and I stood there, and I looked at it, and then I noticed a tire. And then I started noticing the color of the tin pile. And then I noticed body parts. And I looked over at the wall where the plane had come in to the Pentagon. I looked, and there was this big circle, hole. And I lined it up there, and I looked, and I said, I realized this was the cockpit. September 12th on the morning, it was a beautiful morning, sun was shining, and I looked up at the end of the ladder truck, and a rainbow had formed across the Pentagon from our water, and I just looked back at the guys, and I just looked, and I said, I knew we was gonna be all right. I heard a person say that maybe today our flag, we hung a little lower because of the tragedy. And I told the person, I don't think our flag ever stood any taller.
Well, at the time that September 11th events occurred, I was working for the City of Fairfax Fire Department in Northern Virginia as the Assistant Fire Chief of Operations. I was in my office that morning and received a call from the shift captain that was on duty at our Fire Station 3, indicating to me that the events were unfolding at the World Trade Center in New York City. I turned the television on and began to watch those events, and then I think, as everyone knows, a short time later, the Pentagon was impacted by an aircraft. Our headquarters office was only about 12 miles away from the Pentagon, and I actually felt the impact in my third floor office at our headquarters fire station. Didn't really understand what was taking place until the news footage cut in indicating that a plane had gone into the Pentagon. The city fire chief happened to be out of the area at the time, and so my first duties were to begin callback of off-duty personnel to upstaff the city fire department, because it was very clear that this was going to be a major and long-term incident that was going to require a lot of resources. So I spent about the first hour and a half after the Pentagon was struck, gearing the City of Fairfax resources up so that we could contribute as well as keep our city services in place for our own community at the same time. I then left as greater alarms were sounded. I arrived at the Pentagon just before 10 o'clock in the morning, so the Pentagon incident had been unfolding for better than an hour before I arrived. Heavy fire conditions on multiple floors made it very difficult for the firefighting forces to operate to conduct search and rescue, and that's primarily because the Pentagon, in terms of the way it's constructed, is a fortress. My particular role as the afternoon continued, I was assigned to be the division commander of what was known as the A&E division. So I was operating at a command post in the inner courtyard, responsible for the crews that were working inside in rings A through E. So a call went out after I made the request to the surrounding jurisdictions looking for a very low-profile ladder truck, and the answer came from the Woodsboro Volunteer Fire Company here in Frederick, Maryland. They responded, they showed up, came through the service tunnel without any problem, and I met with them initially, gave them their tactical position to set up, and that's where I first met Chief Mickey Fyock. And of course, I didn't know that at that point our paths would cross again in my employment here. But I will tell you that the crew from Woodsboro and their truck set up, they performed flawlessly. They operated through the entire overnight hours to carry out their mission. I guess in terms of what the Pentagon, interestingly enough, helped the fire departments prove is that all of the regional coordination and joint training that we had done in the years prior really paid off. But to see this in one event that essentially combined a building fire, a crash of a commercial airliner, and the collapse of a very large structure all into one incident is almost unheard of, and yet it was unfolding before our eyes. I think the message is that we're a nation that can take a punch. Nothing after that put a dent in our resilience as a country, as Americans, as what we stand for when it comes to how our society acts and behaves together as the greater community of the United States of America.
I was here. I was getting dressed. I was headed to the hospital. I was president of the hospital auxiliary, and I was going for a photo shoot with the advertisers. And I got a telephone call, and it was Alan. And Alan said, "Mom, I wanted to let you know I'm all right." And I said to him, "Why wouldn't you be all right?" And he said, "Haven't you heard? An airplane's hit the World Trade Center." He said, "Turn on the TV." Well, the TV's always on in this house, but the news hadn't started to cover it. But while we were talking, the news started to cover it. He went through a series of questions trying to validate whether it was his building or not his building. And I affirmed him at the time it wasn't his building. And so I verified, and he said, "I think it's a small plane." And I said, "I don't think so, Alan." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because that hole goes from one side of the building to the other."
And then Sharon called me at work. I was working for BB&T at the time. I was regional president here in Frederick, and I had an appointment. I had a 9 o'clock appointment, but I also had a TV in my office. So she called. I didn't have the TV on, so I turned it on, and I was talking with my administrative assistant as well as my client that was coming in, and I was telling him, my son, about the world, that the plane had hit the one tower, and of course the other, they're showing pictures, and I was like, "Yeah, my son's in that tower right there." And then just about that time is when that second plane came in, which was just crazy to watch that happen live. Once that happened, I immediately basically told them I couldn't stay there anymore, came home, and we were watching what was going on TV. Then here, when that South Tower fell down, I just couldn't believe that, because until then I felt reasonably confident that Alan could get out, although his office was on the 104th floor of the South Tower, so he's way up at the top. After that building fell, which was about a half an hour after it got hit, that just seemed like it was very difficult for them to have gotten out in that amount of time. But we didn't, of course, we didn't know anything. We had family members. Of course, everybody's trying to contact somebody on the telephone or whatever. Of course, all the lines, by that time, everything was down up there. Everything was jammed up. We had, I think, 4 family members that actually drove up to New York and, kind of went to apparently the hospitals had posted names of when they're on the outside of the buildings. Others of us stayed here and kind of manned the phones and the, whatever computers we had and so forth to see, hope that there was some communication someplace. We went and tried to check through homeless shelters and those kind of places to see, well, maybe he got to one of those. And I guess we were actively searching for maybe a couple weeks.
But then we hired a private investigator.
We hired a private investigator to search after that, just to see if they could find any information, any details. I guess a state policeman came here to the house about a year later, a little less than a year after 9/11. I think it was late August of the next year, and said that they had found a small bone from his wrist that was identified with DNA. A request had come in. There was an idea of building a homeless shelter, a permanent homeless shelter here in Frederick, that the Religious Coalition had started. The seeds were out. Once they kind of had that naming gift, the ball just rolled on, and it helped to get the shelter built. We thought it was a good way to honor Alan, and at the same time a good thing for the community, and so it's worked out. Of course, we loved our son. We miss him. we know he's in a better place, even though it hurts our hearts. We grieve for him, and we miss him here on the earth, but we are absolutely convinced that he's in a better place. And whether he's looking down on this interview or whatever, I don't know about that, but I know that he's fine, and at some point in the future we'll see him again.
It's very hard to express my emotions after watching those stories. So I want to again thank the people who participated in sharing their stories with us. I also want to thank our video services team for putting together this presentation, particularly Brandon Rosa. Longer version of these interviews will be posted on the county YouTube channel and will be broadcast on Frederick County Government Channel 19. We'll also share them on social media, so I would ask all of you to share these stories. I think they're very powerful stories about how September 11th affected our community. So today, on the 16th anniversary of September 11th, I would like to make a call for action, that we pay tribute and honor the memory of all those who lost their lives and continue to lose their lives as a result of the terrorist attacks on September 11th, by standing united and standing together as Americans. Let's be united. We can certainly debate our differences. In fact, our democracy depends on us debating our differences, but we need to do that with civil discourse. The melding of opinions and ideas is what makes our country special. So let's rise to this call for action by modeling civility and respect for each other to ensure that through strength and unity that we are truly one country, one nation, indivisible, under God, the home of the brave and the land of the free. And with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker, who is President of the County Council, Bud Otis, who has a proclamation for today.
The members of the emergency services, law enforcement, and the military that are here represented, would you stand behind President Otis, please, for the proclamation? Chief, Ben, Colonel, Mayor.
Is there any other council people here? Kelly, you want to come up?
Dennis, emergency management.
Anybody from the sheriff's office?
And somebody, is there a representative from the sheriff's office who's wanted to come up, please? Thank you.
I'd like to share with you the Patriots' Day proclamation. Whereas September 11, 2001 was etched into Americans' memory when 19 terrorists attacked us with barbarity unequaled in our history. On Patriots' Day, we cherish the memories of thousands of innocent victims lost, extend our thoughts and prayers to their families, and honor the heroic men and women who risked and sacrificed their lives so others might survive. And whereas we remember the 16th anniversary of the events on September 11, 2001, we reaffirm our vows made in the earliest hours of our grief and anger. As liberty's home and defender, America will not tire, will not falter, will not fail in fighting for the safety and security of American people and a world free of terrorism. And whereas ordinary citizens rose to the challenge, united in prayer, and responded with extraordinary acts of courage, with some giving their lives to the country they loved. On Patriots' Day, we remember all those who were taken from us in an instant and seek their everlasting memorial in a safer and more hopeful world. We must not allow our resolve to be weakened by the passage of time. We must meet the test that history has given us and continue to fight to rid the world of terrorism and promote liberty around the globe. Now, whereas as the county executive and the president of the county council of Frederick County, Maryland, we do proclaim September 11, 2017 as Patriots' Day, as in Frederick County and do command its observance in all our actions. God bless America.
Okay, she wants to take a picture.
I've been asked the question, why? Why, after 16 years, do we still have a tribute to September 11th, 2001? Why remember? Well, I'll tell you why. Because we remember over 3,000 people that died that day. And we want to remember the families of those individuals and demonstrate to them the love of our country and the support that they have in America. Next month, we will honor 75 fallen firefighters that died in line of duty in the United States in 2016. In addition to the 75, we will honor 14 Fire Department of New York firefighters that died as a result of cancers attributed to 9/11. At least 157 FDNY firefighters have died since 9/11 of various diseases. 132 members of NYPD and partner law enforcement agencies have died. And approximately 6,000 people, civilians, law enforcement, and emergency responders, are believed to have cancers today related to 9/11. I want to read a tribute of a firefighter that passed away about 3 weeks ago. Firefighter Robert Alexander always wanted to follow in his father's footsteps, even in death. The 43-year-old who worked on FDNY fireboats died Monday of a brain tumor stemming from his time at Ground Zero. For Alexander, succumbing to 9/11 illness is a heartbreaking family affair. A year earlier, his father, Lieutenant Raymond Alexander, died of cancers linked to his time on the pile. FDNY Commissioner Daniel Negro said, "World Trade Center illness continues to take the lives of too many FDNY members, now including 2 generations of the Alexander family." That is why we remember. That is why we will never forget. We are a country that stands together, and we will continue to support the families of those that were lost on 9/11 and from 9/11. This concludes our service. May God bless America. Now, would you please rise for the the dismissal of the colors. And as the colors are dismissed, please follow us outside for a moment of remembrance. Retrieve colors.